Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Vibes. And I'd love to welcome here Robert Andreas. Did I say that right?
Yes, you have.
Sweet,
Very good.
sweet. So, you've authored a book, and it's called The Unshackled Life.
The book itself is called Unshackled. The
Okay.
Unshackled Life is the website. We basically teach people how to let go of their ego or whatever it is that's holding them back towards not working with other people in a way that can help them reach full potential, and yourself as well, as a leader amongst them, right? So it's basically a book on how to get where you want to go in your career, right? As long as you're in management, right? The main purpose is management.
Well, let's learn a little bit more about you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I actually never imagined myself becoming a manager. I always wanted to be an engineer, and I was an engineer for quite a few years. However, I noticed that many times people don't want to deal with either difficult clients, difficult vendors, difficult coworkers, or things of that nature. And they kept pushing me. It's like, Robert, you talk to the client, or, Robert, you close the deal. Robert, you do this. Robert, you do that. Right. And so, um, the reason why I kept doing everything I was asked to do is because I love supporting other people. So if I would need to, I don't know, mow the lawn for myself, I probably wouldn't do it. It would probably be like a big, jungle outside, but because my wife wants the lawn mowed, right? Like I find it within myself, okay, let me go mow the lawn so she'll be happy, right? And so I really like doing these things for other people. And if I do it for others, it's like it doesn't really take energy from me as much as it gives me. Because I find energy in the fact that I support others. And I feel, based on what I've noticed of other people in leadership that tend to succeed, they have a very similar characteristic. So it's one of two things. It's either they are fueled by ego, right, which can work, by the way. It can definitely work, and we see examples of that across history, right? Or they are fueled by a, a genuine desire to help those around them, right? And whether it's one or the other, if it's strong enough, you will tend to see them succeed, right? Again, I know you don't talk politics on this show, but you can see where let's say ego gets you, like it can take you very, very high, and you can see where altruism takes you. Again, you can go very, very high. You can just talk about Mahatma Gandhi. We can talk about Nelson Mandela. We can talk about so many people, Marie Curie, etc. So, yeah.
Well, when it comes to dealing with employees, and say you have to pull someone in the office and you have a very uncomfortable situation, how do you handle it?
Typically, I try to understand the perspective of the person that I'm speaking to. This works 97% of the time, and exactly 97%, because the other 3% are psychopaths, narcissists, so it doesn't work. If you just ask for their opinion of what happened and so on, it's complete parallel to reality, like complete didn't happen that way, right? And so you need to have a perspective of reality that can be um, fed by data and logic, and that will help a lot in these conversations. Because if you, for example, let's say two examples. One is simple. You come into the room with someone that's not narcissistic or a psycho, and you just talk with them. And you can very easily reason them through their failure, because typically you don't have a difficult conversation because they succeeded. They failed at something. They either were mean to someone else, like they failed to uphold, social standards, or they are they failed on a project or, on a deadline or something, whatever. So you need to have a difficult conversation, and typically those go well. If you have empathy, if you have understanding, those go well. The opposite side, if just so everyone that listens understands, psychopaths have a mental disability to accept blame. It's not the unwillingness. And that's why many people get angry. Like, why don't you understand you failed, right? I'm exaggerating and I'm getting straight to the point. But those people aren't capable of doing that, right? It's like looking at someone and saying, why don't you jump 10 feet? They can't jump 10 feet. Like, maybe there are people that can do that, or why can't you run, a mile in X number of times? They physically are not able to. Just like that, people that have this level of, narcissism, or, they're sociopaths or psychos, they are not able to take blame. Inability, not willingness. And so when you notice someone's inability to take responsibility, right, for their failures, that's a red flag. If they don't do it once, because they're upset, because then whatever, and so on, okay, fine, maybe. But you still jot it down like, hey, I had this conversation with this person. It was very difficult. They tried skewing the facts 10 times, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. And then if that is a pattern, or that becomes a pattern, next time, same thing, next time, same thing, just let them go, right? You're not going to win. And the reason why I say that is not because you can't work with that person, or they can't be competent, or they can't do stuff. It's just sooner or later they're going to do something so bad, that you wished you never hired them. And I'm talking from experience, right? Like, I had people that were like that. They added some value to the company, but they added 100 times more negative, during that same period, because of issues with culture, issues with clients, issues with, many, many things. And all of them they provoked, and you can like factually see and chronologically and so on, but they obviously never took responsibility. So be careful of that. But this is my answer, right? So if it's 97% of cases, it's going to be very easy, as long as you have empathy, understanding, and you really genuinely want, the best outcome for the meeting. And in 3% of cases, you need to determine that you need to let that person go.
You ever had an employee that you felt like there was potential there, but they were ready to give up?
That actually happened many, many times. I was always the cheerleader in all of my organizations. I would always say, "Hey, you can do better. Come on,
Mhm.
let's try again." I specifically remember we had a copywriter, or they wanted to do copywriting. They were doing content writing before, and copywriting isn't content writing. It's like psychology and knowing, what to say, when to say it, so that people convert and click on the button, right? It's like very, very different than content writing. Content writing is basically storytelling. You tell stories, but then copywriting is you tell stories that sell, right? And the person at the end needs to click a button, or buy something or whatever. So they tried doing that, and I think I do not want to exaggerate, minimum dozens of hours. I don't know if I got to 100 hours, but dozens and dozens of hours training them, giving them feedback. And it just felt like a lost cause. I mean, not to me, to herself. She's like, I'm not good at this. This is never going to work. I'm like, look, what I recommend you do, and this is what I recommend everyone do, and talk to, with their staff. Look at copy, and we call it copy for sure, the copywriting, like the sales page. So you look at the sales page you wrote today, and look at the first sales page you ever wrote, right? And then compare and see how much better you are in this time. Because in 6 months or whatever, in these months, if you're 2, 3, 4, 5x better, or if you can go back to your first draft, the one you ever wrote, and you yourself make like 100 edits or of how this can be better, you've improved. And you liking it is a very good sign that you should do it, right? If you genuinely like doing it, the only point where I would say don't keep doing it is if you haven't become better.
Okay.
So let's say you're a developer and you started doing, backend development, and and you're just starting off, right? And you know how to do logins, and I forgot my password buttons and emails, and like whatever, all of the basic stuff you learn as a backend developer. And then 6 months later, if that's still your level, like you're not, like you can't do complicated, database queries to make it more effective, you make the query more effective, so you spend less money on the database. Like if you're not doing, some form of AI with your, like if you can't tell that this is a much better developer than this, then just don't do it anymore. Even if you like it, don't do it as a career, do it as a hobby, and do something that you both like and can genuinely become very good at, right? Because that's your sweet spot. And you probably have more things that you like and a few things that you can be good at. Typically, there aren't many, but there are a few. So you have options. And so that would be my 2 cents. That's what I would advise managers to do. Use data. See, is this person actually improving? If they are, keep, hey, let's improve, let's keep doing this. Or another thing that I could say, if the rate of improvement is incredibly slow, like unreasonably slow, then again, maybe it's just you knocking, your head against the wall. Well, the head will break sooner than the wall, and so that might be, recommending to someone, you need to spend more time doing this, like outside of working hours, because otherwise this isn't going to work as a career, at least not at this line of, or at least not at this company. Otherwise, you just try to do something else with your career, right? So that's the honest feedback.
Let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Let's say you're having a problem with upper management. How do you approach, and what's your best advice as far as dealing with the conflict with them?
So if you deal with upper management, you need to be careful to have your ego and attitude in check. They are your superiors. And people nowadays forget that. Very interesting. The new generation has no idea what that means.
Oh, that's
It's
right.
crazy. But they have no idea, right? It's like I could never talk back to my mom or my dad. Never. Like
Right.
it wasn't a thing. The moment you would talk back, you would get slapped or grounded or whatever. Right? That's the reality. Like you understand what authority means, right? Like you're taught. Or at school, no one, like when I was young, no one would dare sue the school because their kid got slapped at school, because they know if they got the slap, it was probably warranted. They probably, were having a tantrum or whatever, or they spoken up. And the only thing the teacher had to say is, the kid insulted me. They called me a so and so,
Right.
right? And then the parent would look at the kids like, did that happen? And you could look at other children and so on, right? And if you find out that that happened, not only do you tell the teacher in front of them, if he ever does that again, slap him twice, once from you for you and once from me, right? So that's basically how we were brought up. And I think that is, I don't want to diminish, quality of education, of today's quality or whatever, but I think that's so much better than the way, or the level of power children are given now above their authority figures. And so they never learn what an authority figure is, and it's not their fault. And that's how they are being raised. Um, so that's the first thing. Remember, you are their superior, or their inferior in the hierarchy. Not their inferior as a human, in God's name, we're all identical if you want to go deep, right? However, in this specific company, you're the VP of sales and I am the sales associate, right? You've been here for 10 years, I've been here for 6 months. Have some perspective, on that. Okay, so that's number one. Put yourself in your place and speak from there. And then from that attitude, you can say, hey, look, I've been here for 6 months or 6 years or whatever. I've noticed this and this and this as things that can be done better. And here are my recommendations, this and this and this. This is factual. I can prove this is correct. I've done my due diligence, but don't go superficially. Don't just because you think something like you could do better, go and all of a sudden advocate. I've had that happen so many times. Like How do you know that will be better? Well, we won't know until we try. Okay, so you understand there is a very large chance that this is going to fail. Yes, I do. Okay, are you willing to take responsibility for that failure? And if they say no, they don't care enough, right? Right, because it's just reality, right? I mean, that's reality. Because people like myself or like others that have succeeded in their careers, they have taken risks, they have taken challenges, right? When the first time I went to Siberia, I had a job there. I went into one department, like that's how I was hired. And then by the end of 3 months, I was like in like sort of like an internship. By the end of 3 months, I already went through four different departments. I was holding board meetings, telling people, about the insights I was finding and so on, everything data backed, right? And so at one point, I remember I was in the elevator and the guy said, I can't remember the other guy's name, but let's let's call him Mark. Doesn't matter, whatever. And the guy tells me, Mark told me today that he really likes you. And I look at him, oh, well, that's very nice of him. And he looks at me, he's like, no, you don't understand. Mark never says that about anyone. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. That's good. Right. So and you take the risks. You're right. You say, hey, yes, I believe this can work better than this, and I want to try. Right. And I'm putting my career, my salary, my whatever on the line. I want to do it, or I will do it in my spare time. You don't need to pay me extra. I want to test this. Like I work 8 hours and then I work an extra hour to test whatever I want to test. Because, people have this weird misconception that the company I work for owes me something. They owe me my salary, right? They owe me whatever. They don't owe you anything. It's a transaction, right? Like you give your best effort, I pay your salary. You give more effort, I pay you more, right? And so then obviously if you're working with upper management that just you can't work with, leave. Find another company. But chances are you can make it work with them most cases, right? So number one, start from a point of humbleness, humility, right? Have some perspective. Number two, have data backed, reasoning for whatever it is. Even if you ask for a raise, because that might be a thing. Hey, I've been here, I've done this. This is how I'm better than all of my peers. This is why, you should give me a raise. Blah blah, whatever. Like just have data to support whatever it is you want to change or propose. And then be mindful. Step three, be willing to work with them on a solution right together. Just because they don't accept your solution up front, that doesn't mean that they disagree. That just means that, they might have a slightly different perspective and you can, try doing that.
Well, the last thing I'd like to talk about is how do you deal with that difficult client? That one that is ready to cuss you out at the drop of a hat. Those kind of folks.
So, a very good question. Typically, it starts from expectation setting. So, within our contracts, and I kid you not, within our contracts, we have articles that stipulate that you cannot swear, you cannot raise your voice, you cannot be rude. Like the contract says that you cannot do those things. And we give all of our contracts to people and they read them, we go through them, line by line, we explain why each line or each article is important, and that's one of them. And as you set the expectation from the very beginning, you can't do this. Not with me, not with any of my colleagues. Do you understand? Right? And you say, if you do this, right, there are either penalties or, we can end the engagement or, we'll just hop off the call. Because at the end, if you're swearing, I'll just hop off the call until you relax and then we can, talk tomorrow or whatever. Right? So you set expectations. Number one. Number two, you put boundaries. So there's a difference between expectations and boundaries. And expectations, for example, I tell my child, don't put your finger in the, switch. And then guess what? They just go to the switch. And then
Yep.
I put a boundary. I put either myself there or I put something there so they don't get to the switch. So number one is the expectation setting, but sometimes it doesn't work, right? Like even though you set the expectation. But if you did not set the expectation, it's unreasonable for you to expect them to act a certain way. If you did not tell them how you expect them to act with you, right? It's like rules of engagement. That's what it's called. It's the rules of engagement. This is how we engage with one another. And you set those rules, and some of them people would say are social norms. But if you've lived long enough, you'll know that doesn't exist, right? A social norm doesn't really exist. It's just whatever you're used to. That's it. If you go to a different country, go to a different company, go even to a different state within your country, you'll see that the norms are different, right? So there is no such thing as the universal norm, right? You can just argue that they're universally it's wrong to swear at someone. But I'm sure there are companies, that swear at each other all the time because that's how they operate. I don't know if anyone saw the Wolf of Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
Try being, a normal, natural, very calm individual in that environment. It will be very difficult for you. It just is not the culture, right? And so that's what I would suggest as step one and two, and step one in expectation setting, step two the boundaries. And by boundaries I mean, if someone starts swearing, you can say, Mark, I thought we agreed that we're not going to swear on our calls, blah blah blah. I don't care about the rules and so on. I don't mind if you don't care about our rules in general, because we don't speak all day and so on and so forth, right? You can do whatever you want in your spare time, but we'll be together here for just 15 more minutes. That's all I'm asking. 15 more minutes. Let's please try to have a productive conversation from which you will benefit. And you will not benefit from this conversation if you keep insulting me. You will benefit from it if we have a productive conversation, fact-based. Let's talk, no more swearing. Let's just get straight to business. What do you think? Right? And so depends on their vibe, but you can feed it back to them at that level of intensity, right? Just don't swear. Obviously, you need to be the change you want to see in the world, right? So you need to bring them back to the level, or bring them down to the level of common, agreeableness, let's say, that you want them at. And that's it. So that's the boundary. You can set that way. If they keep swearing, you just end the call. You drop off, and you send them an email or a text. Hey, I just didn't want to be yelled at anymore. Whenever you want to have an actual conversation, let me know. I can jump back on the call, no problem. Right? So have a little bit of dignity. It's easier for us. We were raised a few generations ago, and we were raised in a way, and it's like we don't get offended, when people do that, or we can stand up for ourselves easier. But if you're younger, you just need to understand that this isn't about vanity. This isn't about ego. This is about expectation settings, number one, and then boundaries, number two. And then if you do these two things correctly, most people will be agreeable enough for you to get done whatever you need to get done with them.
So you said that your website is the unshackledlife.com.
The unshackledlife.com. Yes.
Okay. Are y'all on social media?
I am. If people Google my full name, Robert Indries, right, they'll see them in the show notes and the title. They can find my website, my socials, everything.
I will definitely put that in the description. Robert, thank you so much for coming on today. And the book is available on the website. And is there anywhere else they could get the book?
They can get the book anywhere books are sold. So they can get it in bookstores, in airports, on Amazon, and so on. We're in hundreds of locations all over the internet and physically.
All right. Again, thank you. And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button. From our regulars, you guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. Until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network